With the latest agriculture news from across the state and nation, it's time for the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. Here's your host, Sabrina Halverson.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning on the AgNet News Hour. Coming up today, we'll hear about the upcoming Ag Tech event, FIRA, which is heading to the Sacramento area next month. But we start today with some good news for consumers. From the latest data on food prices, here's Gary Crawford.
This year, food shoppers have been seeing grocery prices each month either remaining stubbornly steady or going up from month to month. However, according to the latest Consumer Price Index,
grocery prices fell by 0.1% in August.
Not a huge drop. Not that big anyway, only 0.1%. But Agriculture Department economist Megan Schweitzer told us that's still a good sign for consumers.
This is the first time that we've seen grocery prices decline in 2024. We had a few months where prices remained steady, but August is the first time that we saw an actual decline in grocery prices so far in 2024.
Now, Megan says this does not mean every food product dropped in price.
Well, you'll see it more in some products than others. And so, that 0.1% is the average across all products. And so you might see a more noticeable decline in certain products where you might see an increase in others.
Megan tracks prices for 15 major food categories, and in August, prices fell for 6 of those.
Some of those categories are some of our larger food spending categories, like fresh fruits and vegetables, cereals and bakery products, and kind of a catch-all other foods category. And so those categories really were what were driving down grocery prices in August,
making up for some major price hikes last month for a couple of products.
So of all categories, prices rose the most for eggs in August. And prices rose by 4.8%. And so eggs continue to be affected by an avian influenza that has affected egg layers.
Consumers are currently paying about 28% more for eggs than this time a year ago, and about 4% more for beef. Nonetheless, in August, the price drops more than made up for the price increases. Now, Megan says there are many possible reasons for this slowdown in food price inflation, and here are just a few of them.
After the price increases we saw over the past few years, there's been demand from consumers and pressure in retailers on manufacturers to sort of keep prices from rising even further. And so that, along with other factors such as lower energy and gas prices, have helped to slow rising costs.
Yes, gas prices are down almost 11% from this time a year ago. This is Gary Crawford reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
News from the north, fall harvest across Canada is progressing at an erratic, uneven pace. Dennis Guy reports.
For many regions, the 2024 growing season saw an extreme change in weather patterns and conditions. Some areas of western Canada experienced change from dry conditions into extended wet conditions, resulting in damaged crops in some regions. But in central northern Alberta, where Jeff None farms cereal grains and canola, timely rains and good growing conditions show the promise of good yields. None says that while some are struggling with poorer yields, his farm is having as good a year as he can remember.
We're a good 15-20% in. Mostly barley and cereals. Nobody's into the canolas yet. With that heat in July, some plants that barely said anything, and you don't have to go too far to the west. Thinner soil, some 50 bushel barley and some pretty poor crops. The better ground with deeper reserves kind of paid off, and all the heat we can get through September, and hopefully we don't get too cold and it can keep going.
Conversely, in southern Manitoba, just west of Winnipeg, Tyler Bartmanovich is experiencing variable yield. Bartmanovich lives in the Red River drainage basin, but with high water levels this year and heavy rains, standing water drowned out portions of both his spring wheat and canola fields.
We had some fields do pretty well, and then we had some fields do pretty poor because we had about 5 inches of rain in 5 days at the end of June, just when wheat was heading out, canola was flowering. At the same time, the Red River was very high. This water stuck around for about 10 days, wasn't able to drain as fast as normal. We're very close to the river. We're about 4 miles from the Red River. So a lot of drowned out holes in the wheat and canola
In southwestern Ontario, Mark Houston is watching a slow fall harvest year unfold. Houston says he was lucky to get his corn crop planted in a timely fashion, but most of his soybean crop was planted very late, and now that crop is slow to ripen. So Houston has higher hopes for his corn crop than his soybeans this fall.
Corn went in relatively on time. We got the first couple days of beans in, and then the taps opened up, and it just rained and rained and rained. We've got beans that weren't planted until, the start of July, and then you saw the heat come up. The corn crop looks like it's going to be all right. Ear size looks like it's down a little bit, being too wet for too long. Soybeans, I'm hoping for average, but with all the rain that we had, disease pressures were up.
In central southern Ontario, just north of Toronto, Aaron Bowman is watching his corn crop ripen into an excellent crop.
It's definitely going to be a good crop. We were fortunate. Something would really have to happen weather-wise for it not to be. Those who planted a little later, they might be struggling, but we're half milk line on a lot of this corn. And if they don't have frost in the forecast, I think we're good till October. I don't want to jinx it for us, but I think we're smooth sailing here.
Reporting from Canada, I'm Dennis Guy.
You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halverson. In today's National Spotlight, the Deputy Agriculture Secretary offered the details involving the recent G20 Agricultural Ministers meeting in Brazil. Rod Bain reports.
A recent gathering of leaders within the group of 20 nations in Brazil, with agriculture and food systems as the focus.
The theme of this year's meeting is Building a Just World and a Sustainable Planet, and it's focused on various pillars, which include improving the sustainability and resilience of agriculture and food systems, and particularly through agricultural productivity growth and innovation.
That's Agriculture Deputy Secretary Xochitl Torres-Small. She led the U.S. delegation at the G20 Agricultural Ministers meeting, and while at the ministerial, provided an update to reporters.
It's been a successful meeting, and the G20 declaration was reached for the first time in 2 years, reaffirming those priorities.
Among the gains in priorities, as agreed upon by ministers,
another goal was enhancing international trade, which is fundamental to expanded markets at home as well as to global food security, making food systems more inclusive by expanding opportunities for small-scale farmers, women, youth, indigenous people, and other underrepresented groups.
Deputy Secretary Torres-Small says during the course of the meetings, she had opportunity to
share more with my counterparts about how USDA is fostering more resilient local and regional food production, ensuring access to safe, healthy, and nutritious food, fostering innovation to develop more sustainable climate-smart production practices, and promoting trade policies that enable the adoption of such practices.
Another newsworthy note from the G20 Ag Ministers meeting, U.S. efforts to discuss future partnership in development of a sustainable aviation fuel industry with Brazil.
It's one of my priorities coming in is ensuring that Brazil gets the message that we want to work together on sustainable aviation fuel, but we have to be at a level playing field.
The Deputy Secretary elaborated.
Right now, the United States has a 2% tariff for ethanol coming in from Brazil, but they've leveled an unfair and unjust 18% tariff on our ethanol. We're not asking Brazil to buy 1 billion gallons of U.S. ethanol. We just want them to treat our products the same manner that we treat theirs.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
That's today's National Spotlight. Now here's John Hareth with the Livestock Report. The federal milk marketing order reform process is continuing, and dairy farmers have concerns. Chet Smith has details.
Ports on the east and Gulf Coast of the United States could shut down at the end of this month if the International Longshoremen's Association and U.S. Maritime Alliance fail to reach a new contract agreement. While the majority of U.S. red meat shipments flow from the West Coast ports, a work stoppage in the east and Gulf would still be very disruptive to the industry, according to U.S. Meat Export Federation President and CEO Dan Hallstrom.
The largest ports for U.S. beef and pork exports are on the West Coast, the 3 big ports there, but that doesn't mean that the East and Gulf Coast isn't important. We look at total waterborne exports of pork. About 45% of those go through the East and Gulf Coast ports, and on the beef side, about 30% of the waterborne exports. That 30 might sound a little low, but it doesn't mean it's not important, because there's quite a high percentage of chilled beef that goes out, very high value chilled beef that goes out from the East Coast in particular for destinations like Europe and Middle East. So we can't overstate the importance of the East Coast and Gulf Coast ports. Even though the West Coast is larger, still a very significant quantity is exported through the East and Gulf Coast.
While some traffic is being redirected to the West Coast, those ports could not absorb all of the shipments.
Redirecting to the West Coast is a potential very short-term solution, but it's by no means a long-term solution at all, because it's not just U.S. beef and pork. You got all sorts of commodities that use these same ports. So we're challenged to export all of our product today using all the ports. So we cannot afford a shutdown in any part of the supply chain. Here we are just a few days away from the expiration of the contract on September 30th. Most definitely we need to get the White House or anyone else involved that can help to spur discussions to get back to the table and avoid any kind of interruption of service later this month.
For more, please visit usmef.org. For the U.S. Meat Export Federation, I'm John Hareth.
USDA's federal milk marketing order reform process is nearing its end. Roger Cryan, chief economist for the American Farm Bureau Federation, says the comment period is one of the last steps in a process that began more than a year ago.
Co-ops and processors proposed some changes in the price formulas. USDA asked for more proposals, and there was a hearing to consider the 21 proposals that USDA thought fit to hear. Farm Bureau was there throughout, and USDA put out their recommendations in July with comments due last week.
He says Farm Bureau considers USDA's proposed changes a mixed bag with some positives to be found.
Particularly the ones to the formulas that will increase the Class 1 prices for bottling milk. We are not happy with USDA's huge increases in the make allowances, that part of the milk value that is deducted for the processor. Those make allowances were already big enough that cheesemakers have been building a lot of new plants and plant expansions. The cost survey data USDA used to raise those make allowances badly biased. It's based on voluntary surveys from small, high-cost processing plants that are not at all representative of the dairy manufacturing business generally.
A decision on final FMMO changes is expected by the end of the year.
USDA should have a final decision in mid-November, which we hope looks a little different from the recommended decision. Then each order will be put up to a vote of farmers and co-ops. The markets where at least 2/3 of the farmers vote yes, the price formula is going into effect.
Chad Smith, Washington.
We will be back in just a moment with more agriculture news. You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halverson. For this interview segment, we go to Chuck Zimmerman.
Here at the Farm Progress Show, I'm visiting with Martha Smith with Bayer. And first of all, what do you do with Bayer?
Hi, great to meet you today, Chuck. I work on the stakeholder relations team at Bayer, who's responsible for our relationship with agricultural stakeholders such as grower groups, commodity groups, the grain trade, agribusiness association, that entire ecosphere of different groups that are out here supporting farmers every day.
Well, you just had moderated a panel here at the media tent at the show, and the Modern Ag Alliance was like a major component of this. Some people may not understand what that is. Maybe we could start there.
Yeah, so the Modern Ag Alliance was formed earlier this year with support by Bayer. There are now more than 85 organizations that are a member of it, and those are groups from across the U.S., both state groups and national groups, again, ones that are representing grower groups, the agribusiness, retail, that entire, again, spectrum of different groups. And the point of the Modern Ag Alliance is to show that broad support, that the need for farmers to have continued access to crop protection tools is not specific to one state or one type of farming. This is truly an issue that impacts all farmers, and so wanted to create this alliance to be able to show that broad need, again, for the protection of crop protection tools.
Well, in your panel, you had a farmer, you had somebody from Iowa Soybean, and I think the other was the Iowa Agribusiness.
Agribusiness Association of Iowa.
Association, there you go. I knew I could say it. So kind of what were the topics that you wanted them to speak to?
Yeah, so what you had on stage here today was an example of some of the many supporters that we have here in Iowa. So been really fortunate to be able to work with Iowa Soybean Association, with the Agribusiness Association of Iowa on the legislation that was introduced last year by some legislators here in Iowa. And so wanted to show that, the involvement of groups like that, and also to hear firsthand what farmers really think about this and why that we need to have lawmakers have this as a priority. We all know there are so many issues in front of state legislatures every year, and there's lots of issues within agriculture too. And so wanted to show that farmers themselves really do have concerns about whether or not they are going to have continued access to crop protection tools.
Well, Kevin, our farmer that was on the panel, this is vitally important to him and his operation. What did you hear from him about how important this is?
Yeah, I thought Kevin did a great job, a really powerful job of telling that story on his own farm and how he uses glyphosate and other crop protection tools in order to enable no-till farming and to enable the use of cover crops. And we've all known for a long time that those are important things to be good stewards of the land, but it's even more important these days as we think about biofuels and advanced fuels and opportunities with carbon and just this whole space of regenerative farming and the different practices that farmers have the option and the ability to put in place in order to access some of these new premiums that are coming down the marketplace. And so really thought Kevin did a fantastic job of showing that on his own farm, glyphosate in particular really is the cornerstone for how he has been able to move to no-till farming as well as using cover crops.
So how would you summarize the panel after having gone through all of that?
Yeah.
What would be like a little summary of that?
I thought it was a great conversation today, and I think it showed that, farmers are paying attention to this. So they're not just users of crop protection tools, they're really a part of the system and want to know that they have confidence in the labels that are coming out from EPA and that labels will continue to be, and products will continue to be able to be used on their farms and that they have that broad diversity of different products too. And so I think the panel showed today that this really is a critical issue and it's a timely issue too, and that we need to have action at the state level, the federal level. There's a lot going on in the court systems too, but those can take a little bit of time. And so what I saw out of those farmers today is that urgency of we need to take action. We need to get back to that place of, as we said on the stage there, that the label is the law, that we can have confidence in what the label says, and that EPA is indeed the authority in the U.S. when it comes to determining the carcinogenicity and human health effects of crop protection products.
So what would you like to see in the future when it comes to this?
Yeah, so we're hoping to see a continued interest in the Modern Ag Alliance. We'd welcome to have more supporters. We'd encourage people to reach out to us if they'd like to be a part of this. And we're hoping to see more legislators as well join this. And so from the standpoint of introducing the legislation and understanding the issue here and this need for certainty for farmers. And so our hope is to continue to build upon this and, again, just get back to where we thought we were a few years ago, where we have FIRA, we have the laws related to pesticides in the U.S., and that we can get back to having the trust in that sound science and that rigorous process that is coming out of EPA so that farmers can get back to doing what they do, which is producing food and farming their farms rather than worrying about whether or not the EPA labels are indeed holding up.
Well, thank you very much, Martha, for visiting with me here after this panel that you just held, and we are here at the Farm Progress Show. I'm Chuck Zimmerman reporting.
You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. The USDA is out with its first trade forecast for the 2025 fiscal year. On this edition of Agriculture USA, Gary Crawford talks with an expert about the forecast and what it could mean for farmers.
Well, let's jump into our Agriculture Department time machine and go back to the end of the year 2022. We're seeing a lot of smiling faces here as they pass the word that in 2022 the U.S. has just set a new yearly record for agricultural exports.
We didn't imagine that the export performance would be this phenomenal.
Phenomenal. The jubilant head of the USDA's Foreign Agricultural Service, Daniel Whitley, announcing back in 2022 that U.S. agricultural exports in that year did hit a phenomenal, record-breaking $196 billion. Whitley told us then he's looking forward to breaking the $200 billion barrier in 2023. But as you may know, that did not happen as exports have gone down, not up, in 2023 and 4. Are things likely to improve in 25? We'll take a look on this edition of Agriculture USA. I'm Gary Crawford.
We're facing export competition and weak Chinese demand.
and some other export challenges as well. This from the Agriculture Department's chief economist, Seth Meyer. Just the other day, USDA released its first official trade forecast for the 2025 fiscal year that starts in October.
What this report indicates is a decline of $4 billion into $169.5 billion for exports, an increase of $8 billion on imports to a total of $212 billion for fiscal year 25, which means a rising trade deficit of $42.5 billion forecast for fiscal year 25, up from a revised $30.5 billion trade deficit the prior year. That's about 35% increase in the trade deficit.
Wow. So why are U.S. ag export sales values down so much?
A lot of this is tied to falling commodity prices and the world getting much more comfortable with where supplies of corn, beans, wheat, cotton all are relative to where we were at perhaps between 2020 and 2023.
That's when there were major uncertainties about the available supplies of many ag commodities. Today, those uncertainties are pretty much gone. Prices have come down to reflect ample supplies. Now, one other point that Seth Meyer makes is that U.S. commodities are still being bought and sold. In fact, sales and shipping volumes are expected to rise next year.
But that's because in order to move product, a more abundant product, you're having to see some price declines to move some of that stuff out the door.
Seth Meyer says it's also becoming harder to get those products out the door.
And then if we look at some other things around the world, maybe a slower Chinese economy, continued strength of the U.S. dollar, China diversifying its sources for trade, perhaps a little bit weaker on export competitiveness for ourselves. Those are all things which are posing some challenges for our exports.
And of course, in today's ag world, most farmers depend directly or indirectly on exports for much of their incomes. For example, Meyer says about 40% of the wheat and soybeans grown in the U.S. is exported. For corn, it's about 15 to 20%. So what happens in the export market can have a major effect on farmers' income.
I think we're approaching this transition from good profit years to really tough margin years, and we're doing it very quickly. We tend to go through these cycles where you get 2 or 3 years where commodity prices jump, input prices start to follow them. You get a correction in commodity prices as producers around the world respond. Input prices remain a little more sticky, and that leads to narrowing margins where, you think back on the cycle from 2010 to 2013, you had good commodity prices, followed by, say, 2014 to 2019, where margins were pretty tough. So, I think we're quickly transitioning from those good profit years to pretty rough margins for many commodities.
So 2025 could be a belt-tightening year for farmers who depend on exports. Meanwhile, this year, USDA's Undersecretary for Trade, Alexis Taylor, has organized 7 ag trade missions around the globe to bring sellers and potential buyers together.
They really open doors for our exporters by giving them an opportunity to really forge relationships with potential customers, to gather market intelligence, and I think most importantly, generate sales.
Yes, that's the big one. You have been listening to Agriculture USA. I'm Gary Crawford reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
This segment is brought to you by Live Earth Products. To get to know a little more about Live Earth Products, we're talking on the phone today with Vice President Russell Taylor. What about humates in animal feed? When can you add humates to the animal feed, and what is the benefit of that?
So the interesting thing about animal feeds is just like the fertilizer side, there's actually a lot going on in legislative processes. So there's an act out called the Innovative Feed Act. And currently, you can't include things in animal feed that are giving you other benefits besides nutritive benefits. Let's say, for example, you had a cow that was eating a product that reduced its methane emissions, those enteric gases that are caused just in the natural digestion of a ruminating cow. You can't claim that those products do that benefit. So hopefully people will get involved and say, look, the Innovative Feed Act is necessary and should help farmers. Other benefits of feeding humate is obviously first to reduce enteric gases. But the second one, these are old plant materials. so that those plant materials are rich in trace minerals. So not only are you getting something that's going to help the digestion of the animal, you're also getting an abundant supply of minerals. So that is the main reason farmers are currently including in their animal feeds.
This is all fascinating, but it can be hard to retain some of this information when you're hearing this on the radio or through the podcast. So, is there someplace online, or where can our listeners go and get more information?
Well, the good news is the acts I mentioned, like the Innovative Feed Act and the Plant Biostimulant Act, are publicly available through Congress. You can actually go look at those acts. They're on the website there. The other information you can get is directly through Live Earth products. So if you go to liveearth.com, contact us. You can contact us and our agronomy team. And we're happy to go over any details, questions about how to use these products, how they fit your farm program, how to use them as a tool to implement conservation practices such as nutrient retention, water conservation, and improving soil health.
To get to know more about Live Earth products, you can visit them online at liveearth.com. That is spelled LIVEARTH.com. This is the AgNet News Hour, and we will be back in just a moment with more agriculture news. You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. Here is today's featured interview.
My name is Gabe Yossi. I am the Chief Innovation Officer for the University of California Agriculture and Natural Resources, which is a statewide division under the UC Office of the President that really collaborates between the campuses of UC Davis, UC Berkeley, UC Riverside, UC Santa Cruz, and UC Merced.
And today we are talking about the upcoming FIRA USA event that will be happening in October this year. And we've spoke previously at some of the other FIRAs that have been held, but wanted to start out with just some of the basics of what this event is and where it's going to be this year.
FIRA USA is, we believe, North America's largest ag robotics and automation conference, really focused on that topic. We launched it in 2022 between the Western Growers Association, UC Ag and Natural Resources, and the French founding organization GOFAR together. We launched the first version in Fresno, where we had about close to 1,000 attendees, which we were very happily surprised to host, followed by Salinas in 2023 with about 1,700 attendees. And now in Woodland, California, right outside of Sacramento, the state capital, where we're expecting close to 3,000 attendees this year.
Very cool. And it has been interesting and exciting to see this event evolve from year to year. And we've talked about it a little bit before at the inaugural version, but wanted to get the take from the UC perspective as to why this type of event and this type of conference is important.
Well, there's a couple reasons. One of the reasons we're involved is to create a differentiated event from the other events that are out there. We've got really great events like the World Ag Expo in Tulare, which is really a large farm show and has a whole variety of different things, to very high-tech events in San Francisco like World Agritech, which is focused more on investors and corporates. This one sort of brings those worlds together, brings the tech, the investors, the manufacturers, and most importantly, the farmers together in a place. And one of the things that we do differently at FIRA, we do the panels and the discussions and the researcher talks, but we do demonstrations on site. In the first year, we did it at the Fresno State campus. The second year, we did it last year in Salinas at the venue where we grew vegetables in a parking lot and did demonstrations right on site. And we're going to do the same thing in Woodland. We're turning the parking lot into a field of vegetables right at the venue, and we're going to have demonstrations right there. So all of it's in one place. Why that's important for the University of California is that our mission at UCANR is to extend practical solutions in the food and natural systems based on science and technology. And so FIRA is really a way to bring that to life, both showcasing the great work that our researchers are doing on the campuses in helping invent and advance these machines, but also the work that we do in the field to help validate and support the development of these machines that private companies in California, the US, and the world are bringing to California agriculture to solve various challenges. So it really meets the spirit of what we call extension and public service mission to extend these technologies into the hands of industry in support of our industry and our communities. And then lastly, to support the development of a future workforce that can help farm and farm with technology to create quality jobs in rural food producing regions of California and other places around the U.S.
And that's an interesting and important aspect of that is this is a very forward-looking type of event, looking at things that are coming out now, what might be on the horizon, and it seems like an educational component and that preparation of that next generation seems really right up the alley for where UC fits into the planning and the programming of this type of event.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, we have the first day we call Tech and Education Day on October 22nd, where we do a couple of things. We bring researchers at the University of California, but actually research institutions from all over the United States to showcase sort of the cutting edge research and development they're doing to advance these kinds of robotic technologies forward. We also bring together postdocs and graduate students. So it's a way for them to showcase and highlight the work that they're doing as they either move into industry or in academia. But beyond that, we actually work on bringing even high school kids from 4-H, FFA, and other classes together to really, have a vision of what a career in agricultural robotics might actually look like. So last year we had 300 kids come through and have a fun sort of scavenger hunt, and then really hear from young robotic professionals, like barely older than them out of college, working in these professions, so they could see like, oh wow, there's some really cool jobs that I could get not too far from here, working as a robotic engineer or an operator, coming from all different backgrounds.
I've seen you speak before, typically alongside Secretary Karen Ross, about that next gen and really showing high school students and even younger the variable options that are in agriculture. It's not just farming, it's robotics, it's engineering, it's a lot of other aspects, and really kind of highlighting that potential among younger students to forward the agricultural industry as a whole. And it sounds like this type of event really kind of is a stalwart in that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk a lot about, we're losing farmers. Farmers are aging out of the system. Both farmers and farm workers are saying, like, don't go into farming. It's really hard business. And so we're trying to figure out, like, how can we get farm owners, farm managers, farm workers, and then everybody who has to do with the farm supply chain, to make farming just a better, safer, more exciting, more profitable industry to be in, but then also to just make great jobs, that both help make farming those things, but also make the work environment profitable and fun, and whether you own a farm or whether you're providing a solution or a service to a farm.
And again, this event will be taking place October 22nd through the 24th in Woodland. Any last thoughts on what people might want to keep in mind for the event, or where they can go to get some more information about it?
Yeah, they can definitely go to the website, FIRA-USA.com. All the information is on the website. It's October 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. The first day is really Tech and Education Day. We're going to hear about cutting edge research and engage students, and the demos will begin that day. October 24th is sort of the main business day for the event, where we'll have all industry, farming, demos, panels, food, fun going on that whole entire day. And on 24th, we've got a 4-H benefit breakfast and more demos and more events. So really a packed agenda, something for everybody at the event. It's at the Yolo County Fairgrounds in Woodlands, so it's sort of a great open venue for you to come and spend the day and really see the future of agriculture robotics. Companies will be coming from all over the world to participate in this, so you'll see things that here in good old Woodland that you won't really see anywhere else in California or the U.S., so unique opportunity at a very fair price.
You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. Now for more news. More state governments are utilizing agricultural trade missions, both self-supported and through USDA, as well as USDA programs, in their efforts to increase food and farm export markets and sales. Rod Bain reports.
USDA's 2024 Agricultural Trade Mission lineup concludes this December with a visit by a U.S.-led delegation to Morocco, the final of 7 such events. Among the participants of these and previous USDA-led ag trade missions, state secretaries, directors, and commissioners of agriculture.
From an Arkansas perspective, we were certainly delighted to get to participate for multiple reasons. We're trying to grow our export here in Arkansas and diversify our markets, and that certainly was a big topic for this trade mission.
What we all offer working together is complementary and supplemental ways of filling in each other's diets and security needs, especially for a fast-growing population.
Arkansas Agriculture Secretary Wes Ward on his state's efforts as part of a March trade mission to South Korea. California Agriculture Secretary Karen Ross discussing the diversity of U.S. food and farm products potentially entering and expanding into India after an April ag trade mission. The importance of USDA-led trade missions on state ag exports was evident in that India visit, with 10 state ag department leaders as part of the U.S. delegation. Agriculture Undersecretary for Trade and Foreign Agricultural Affairs Alexis Taylor emphasizes what more state ag departments are realizing.
Trade missions, I think, are a really important tool that we have in our toolbox at USDA to support our food and agricultural export sector to tap into new diverse markets all over the world.
In some cases, states use USDA ag trade missions as part of complementary strategies, also sending state-specific trade missions to an export market either as an introductory or follow-up exercise. Also seeing the importance of state ag export market development and promotion efforts, someone with experience in both realms. Former Undersecretary for Trade and Foreign Ag Affairs, now Chief Executive Officer of the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture, Ted McKinney, and his organization has utilized USDA funding to support similar market development efforts.
This is a long-held program called the Emerging Markets Program. It's got to be a developing country, hence our visits to Asia Pacific and Africa primarily.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
That's today's top agriculture news. I'm Sabrina Halverson. Thank you for sharing your morning with us.
To get more information on the topics you heard today, visit AgNet West online at agnetwest.com. You can also stay connected by following us on our social media at AgNet West on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also find Sabrina Halverson on Facebook. Thank you for listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. AgNet West Radio Network, your primary choice for agriculture news.